Did the alliance of gods really prevent the God of Israel from completing his victory? It sounds impossible. Yet hidden within one of the strangest stories in the Bible is a war so mysterious that scholars, rabbis, and theologians have debated it for centuries. It begins with a rebellion, a prophecy from one of Israel's greatest prophets, and a battle that seemed already won. But everything changed with a single sacrifice. The story begins after the death of King Ahab. According to 2 Kings chapter 3, Mesha, king of Moab, had been paying a massive tribute to Israel, 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. After Ahab died, Mesha rebelled. Whether this tribute was unfair or simply the normal price of being a conquered nation, one thing is certain: Moab wanted freedom. King Jehoram of Israel gathered allies. Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, joined him, along with the king of Edom. The war was being fought against Moab, and eventually the battle would reach Kir-Hareseth, one of the strongest cities in the land. As the armies marched, they ran out of water. Desperate, they sought out the prophet Elisha. Elisha was no ordinary prophet. He was one of the greatest prophets in the Old Testament, the successor of Elijah, and the man through whom many miracles had been performed. Through him came God's answer: "This is an easy thing in the sight of the Lord. He will also deliver Moab into your hand." Victory seemed guaranteed. Everything happened exactly as Elisha had said. The Moabites mistakenly believed the water before them was blood and rushed into battle unprepared. Israel struck them hard. Cities were destroyed, trees were cut down, wells were stopped, fields were ruined. The Moabites suffered heavy losses and were driven back. Eventually the battle reached Kir-Hareseth. The Israelites had nearly completed their victory, but then something unexpected happened. King Mesha realized that the war was lost. His men had been greatly reduced. Even an attempt to break through the enemy lines with 700 swordsmen had failed. In desperation, he did something shocking. He offered something precious. He took his firstborn son, the heir to his throne, and offered him as a sacrifice upon the wall. Not in the fiery manner often associated with Moloch, not hidden inside a temple, but publicly upon the city wall itself before both armies. A horrifying act, one that immediately changed the course of the war. Then comes one of the most mysterious verses in the entire Bible. The text simply says, "And there came great wrath against Israel, and they departed from him, and returned to their own land." But whose wrath? Was it God's wrath? Was it the wrath of Chemosh, the god of the Moabites? Was it simply human outrage, or perhaps fear? The text itself gives no explanation. It merely states that Israel withdrew and returned to its own land. No further details are provided. For once, it almost seemed as though the words spoken through Elisha had failed. Centuries later, in the 19th century, archaeology uncovered the Mesha stele, also known as the Moabite Stone. It contained King Mesha's own account of the war. And according to Mesha himself, it was Chemosh, the god of Moab, who had delivered him. After sacrificing his own son, the heir to his throne, Mesha believed that his offering had been accepted and that Chemosh had acted in his favor. Both sides recorded the war. Both sides believed their god had intervened, making this one of the most fascinating events in biblical archaeology. And yet, from both perspectives, the beginning of the war had been very different. Israel had clearly been winning. Yahweh had seemingly granted victory. Everything had unfolded exactly as Elisha had prophesied, but then something changed. The victory that seemed certain suddenly withered away like a dry leaf falling from a tree. Traditional interpretations insist that God did not lose. Many scholars argue that Israel withdrew for military or political reasons. Others suggest that God himself became angry because of the sacrifice. Interestingly, several Jewish rabbis gave special attention to this explanation. According to some rabbinic traditions, the sacrifice of Mesha's son brought divine anger upon Israel, causing the campaign to end. Others have argued that the passage preserves traces of an ancient worldview in which nations believed that each people had their own god. Naturally, the Moabites believed Chemosh had answered. But what people believe is not always the same as what is objectively true. This strange event forces readers to wrestle with difficult questions. It reminds us that the ancient world was very different from our own. And even after thousands of years, the battle between Israel and Moab remains one of the most debated stories in the entire Bible. Chemosh himself remains one of the lesser-known gods of the ancient world. Unlike gods such as Baal, Moloch, or the Roman god Jupiter, Chemosh appears only rarely in surviving texts. Yet in the few times he is mentioned, he appears as a formidable warrior god, one who protected Moab if the price was paid. And the price paid by King Mesha was perhaps the highest price a father could ever give. The life of his own son, the heir to his throne. It showed just how far the king was willing to go to achieve victory, whether God found the sacrifice so detestable that Israel was commanded to withdraw. Or whether another explanation lies hidden within the text. No one truly knows. Whatever the answer may be, one thing remains certain. The story of King Mesha remains one of the strangest mysteries in the entire Bible. But our journey doesn't end here. Because perhaps the strangest question raised by this story is not whether Chemosh truly intervened. Perhaps the more disturbing question is this: why would ancient people sacrifice their own children? To modern minds, the practice appears barbaric and senseless. Most people today immediately dismiss it as irrational evil, and they often point out that Yahweh strongly condemned the practice. But one thing we must remember is this: the people of the ancient world were not unintelligent. They possessed minds just as complex as our own. They loved their children just as deeply. They grieved, feared, and hoped just as human beings do today. And that raises an uncomfortable possibility. If parents and kings throughout the ancient world repeatedly performed such terrible acts, perhaps they believed they had reasons for doing so. Perhaps they believed they had seen results. After all, no father willingly gives up his own son unless he believes the stakes are unimaginably high. Consider King Mesha. He did not sacrifice a random child. He sacrificed the heir to his throne, his future, his legacy, his bloodline, and he did so publicly before the walls of his city, with defeat already closing in around him. Such an act suggests that Mesha himself believed there was a real possibility that his sacrifice would bring deliverance. Perhaps he had inherited traditions from his ancestors. Perhaps he believed previous kings had experienced similar results. Or perhaps in his desperation he placed all his hopes upon the God he had worshipped his entire life. From the perspective of the Moabites, Chemosh was not an evil being. Chemosh was their protector, their warrior god, the one responsible for defending their nation. And this introduces another important point. Ancient peoples believed that different gods possessed different characteristics. Not every deity was thought to demand human sacrifice. In fact, many gods throughout the ancient world were never associated with such practices. Modern discussions sometimes present Yahweh as though he alone rejected human sacrifice. But historically, various cultures worshipped deities with very different personalities, expectations, and forms of worship. Some accepted offerings of grain. Others accepted animals. Some demanded rituals. And according to the beliefs of the Moabites, Chemosh apparently demanded something far more costly. This leads us to another uncomfortable realization. These beings, if they existed, would not think like human beings. They would not necessarily possess human morality or human emotions. They would not see the world through human eyes. Even within the Bible itself, God often acts in ways that appear difficult for humans to understand. One example comes from the Ark of the Covenant. As the Ark was being transported, it began to shake, and a man named Uzzah reached out his hand to steady it. From a human perspective, his actions appear noble. He was trying to prevent the Ark from falling. Yet according to Scripture, God immediately struck him dead. To modern readers, this seems shocking. But the story presents a God who operates according to holiness and laws that transcend human understanding. Perhaps from the divine perspective, Uzzah had violated a sacred boundary. Perhaps the issue was not his intentions, but his actions. Whether one agrees with that interpretation or not, the story reminds us of something important. God, according to Scripture, is not portrayed as thinking like human beings. And perhaps this same principle applied to the gods worshipped by other nations. From the viewpoint of the Moabites, Chemosh may have had his own requirements, his own expectations, his own laws. And if those requirements were fulfilled, the Moabites believed that their God would respond. History certainly records that Moab was a nation of warriors. And in the eyes of its people, Chemosh was the one who granted victory. Perhaps only kings were expected to make such sacrifices. Perhaps ordinary people were as horrified by these acts as we are today. The truth is, we simply do not know. And history has left us with more questions than answers. Did Chemosh truly answer King Mesha? Was Israel's withdrawal caused by political realities? Was it divine anger? Was it fear? Or does the answer lie hidden somewhere within the text itself? Whatever the explanation may be, one thing is certain. The ancient world was far stranger, far more mysterious, and perhaps far more unsettling than many of us imagine. And in our next journey, we will explore another disturbing question. Why did ancient people believe their gods demanded the blood of their own children? And what similarities exist between Chemosh and another infamous deity whose name has survived for thousands of years? We are going to definitely go deeper into the whole debate behind children and human sacrifice starting from our next video, so stick around. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another episode. And let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe there is another explanation hidden within the text? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.